Hi, everyone. Welcome to H2Omics, the podcast that gives you insight into the world of smart irrigation and sustainability. In this episode, we're joined by Brian Wunsch, a water resource agent at the Idaho Department of Water Resources. With a background in plant and soil science and extensive experience in landscaping and irrigation management, Brian is a knowledgeable voice in the industry, and we are so excited to hear more about his experiences. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Julia. I'm glad to be here.
Well, let's kick it off and dive right in. So, Brian, what sparked your interest in water resource management, and how has that passion evolved over the years?
Most of the jobs that I've had since high school are related to water in one way or another. My first job out of high school was working for the United States Bureau of Reclamation as a student park ranger. My job sites were two reservoirs that are a part of the Orland Project, which is the Bureau's oldest and smallest water delivery project in the state. After that job, I worked for the California Department of Fish and Game as a seasonal check station worker. I reported to the Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge, where over 10,000 acres of land are flooded annually to provide habitat for migrating waterfowl. Then, in 2011, I entered the landscape industry as a business owner, dealing mainly with landscape maintenance and irrigation repair. Over the 7 years that I ran the business, I interacted with irrigation supply vendors, attended irrigation workshops, and learned how to manage landscapes during periods of severe drought and irrigation restrictions. The 5 years following the sale of that business, I was employed at CSU Chico with the Grounds and Landscaping Department. I was fortunate enough to become the campus's irrigation specialist, where I devoted 40 hours a week solely to all things irrigation related. And today, I'm lucky to be a water resource agent with the Idaho Department of Water Resources. I get to help water users document their existing water rights with the state. So throughout the past 15 years and up to today, I've always had a connection with water. This progression of jobs and experiences has allowed me to truly appreciate how important water is as a resource at various scales and for several uses, from flood control, recreation, large and small scale irrigation, and wildlife habitat, just to name a few.
That's amazing to hear how kind of all of your experiences sort of built on one another, and it seems
Yeah,
like it's brought you deeper into the industry.
absolutely.
Can you share a story or an experience that really solidified your commitment to promoting sustainable water practices?
Yes. About half the time that I was in the landscape industry, Northern California was in some state of drought, often being classified as extreme. Implementing sustainable water practices became an absolute necessity as a part of my day-to-day business due to this. I quickly learned what products, tools, and irrigation management practices were available to help me keep the landscapes I was caring for alive. I think the general public has become more aware of the value of clean, usable water through these periods of drought. It's too precious to use it irresponsibly. As I learned more about sustainable water management practices, it became clear to me that I was in a position to implement and promote them. So I would say that my commitment came from necessity and grew organically as I learned more about water resource management.
Yeah, I think something as real as drought, especially with how severe it can be in the West, being such an essential resource really highlights that importance.
Yes.
Let's get into a memorable project or maybe even just a moment from your career. Tell me a little bit about it and why it had a lasting impact on you.
Upgrading the irrigation controllers at CSU Chico to internet and ET-based systems was a memorable project that I'm very proud to have accomplished. I like to think of that as my legacy project at Chico State. I saw an opportunity to modernize the university's irrigation controller infrastructure, taking advantage of a recently completed campus-wide Wi-Fi expansion. Now that the university has these controllers in place, they're able to reduce their irrigation water consumption by a significant amount year after year. Being recognized for that effort from CalSense as a champion of irrigation was an honor, along with being invited to speak about the impact this project had at the Green California Schools and Higher Education Summit.
I love that, there's the note of leaving a legacy, and, that kind of relates to the stepping stones that you have throughout your career. And it must feel so good to have that impact as you then move on to the next step. You also touched on the collaboration and, the Champion of Irrigation story that we worked on with you, as well as the speaking opportunity. And my question is, in your view, what role does collaboration play in addressing water challenges? And can you share an example of a successful collaboration that you've been a part of?
Sure. Collaboration is an absolute necessity when it comes to addressing water challenges because water resource management decisions and their effects are often widespread and far reaching. Collaboration also facilitates the synergy between groups or individuals with specific talents, skills, resources, and connections. I'd have to say that the Chico State Controller project involved a good amount of collaboration, notably with Chico's municipal water provider, California Water Service. I worked with their conservation coordinator, and he helped the university apply for a rebate that covered the cost of most of the irrigation controllers we used.
Yeah, it really does take a village on a project, especially that vast. So to have everyone on the same page and all, moving the parts all together is a special skill for sure.
Yes, yes.
Universities are a place for educating, leadership, and I think really building the future. What role do you think universities play in driving innovation and sustainability in water management practices?
Universities are excellent facilities for fostering innovation and ideas and researching sustainable water management practices. I was fortunate enough to simultaneously be both a student and staff member at Chico State. Oftentimes, my experiences as the campus irrigation specialist would find their way into my coursework or class discussions and vice versa. For example, my final project for water resource policy and planning was a feasibility proposal to install condensate recapture devices above the evaporative cooling towers located on campus. If implemented, these devices could reduce the campus boiler chiller plant's water demand by roughly 6.7 million gallons per year. This proposal was brought to the table during a campus sustainability committee meeting before I departed the CSU, and I hope that the president's cabinet will approve the project. I believe that universities should lead by example and adopt new technologies that align with their strategic plans and goals as they become available. So if you're listening, President Perez, let's make this project happen.
Wow, just the impact and possibility to save so much water is just amazing to me. Every time I see those numbers, whether we're looking at some of our customers or just hearing other stories, it's like millions and millions of gallons of water. And then you think about the compounding effect of that, because that's just looking at one organization.
Yep, every little
Yeah.
bit counts.
Yes, absolutely. You just mentioned how you've kind of faced both roles on the side of academic and the practical side of things. What advice would you give to students or professionals that are entering the field of water management?
My biggest piece of advice is to network. Put yourself out there and make connections. Check out the Irrigation Association website. Look into the scholarships they offer and think about becoming a member. They have several options, and one is a student membership. See what it takes to get certified through the association. Show future employers that you care about managing water resources responsibly. From my experience, attending workshops hosted by irrigation suppliers and water purveyors is definitely worth the time spent. As a student, joining clubs and committees and communicating your interests and goals to your instructors can pay off in many ways.
I think that is such wonderful advice of networking and meeting as many people as you can because you never know who you might meet. If it's just someone, even in passing, you shake the right hand, and it's kind of crazy to see what door that could possibly open.
I agree.
Yeah. So, Brian, how do you stay motivated? I mean, you've been through so many different aspects of your career and, getting to where you are now. How do you stay inspired in your work, especially when faced with complex issues like water conservation and efficiency, when those topics can also seem kind of heavy because we're talking about such a important resource as well?
Sure. Water conservation and efficiency issues can be complex and sometimes daunting, but I know that all the actions I take and decisions that I make are working toward a common goal. I know that what I am doing is part of something bigger than myself. Water issues are rarely resolved overnight, so I also understand that I am playing the long game. As long as I am helping things move in the right direction, I have a sense of fulfillment in what I do. It's motivating to see the progress of technologies like those involved with precision irrigation in agriculture. And I believe that people will value clean, usable water more and more as time goes by. I am confident that water resource stewardship will be highly regarded and respected into the future.
And speaking of future, we've talked kind of about where you've been, but looking ahead, what are your personal goals or aspirations in the field of water resource management? And how do you plan to continue to make a difference in this area?
I definitely want to continue working in the water resources field. I've only been with IDWR for 2 months, and I feel like I've landed in the right spot, and this career is both challenging and fulfilling. I'll continue to seek out volunteer opportunities related to water resource stewardship, education, and conservation. I recently signed up to volunteer for the Utah State University Water Watch program. It's a citizen science effort to monitor hundreds of streams and lakes throughout the state of Utah. I'm now monitoring a local stream, taking measurements, collecting data, and contributing to an online database. For short-term goals, I want to keep learning and progressing in my current role with IDWR. I've also been flirting with the idea of pursuing a master's degree or completing a certificate program related to water resource management, but that's undecided at this point. But no matter what happens, I will always champion the sustainable use of water resources and find ways to stay involved.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, you are doing some amazing work, and I really am inspired by your passion and dedication. I think just everything that you've talked about today and how you are so clearly making a difference is just awesome. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Julia. It was a huge pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the H2Omics podcast. If you'd like to listen to our earlier episodes, visit calsense.com/podcast or search for H2Omics on your favorite podcast platform. See you next time.